Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nat Chat. I'm Nat Eliason, and as you know, we're currently exploring what to do as a college student or recent graduate who feels out of place with all the typical majors, post-grad careers, and wants to do something different. In this episode, I'm joined by Bekah Lundy. Bekah has a very cool story. She started off as a student at the University of Minnesota, and after a year and starting to get interested in web development, she realized that normal college just was not the place for her. She left and went through a coding bootcamp called Turing, and 7 months later, she was working full-time as a developer at a startup called Apto in Boulder, Colorado. I found her through an article she wrote called My Journey to Becoming a 19-Year-Old Full-Stack Engineer, and reached out to her because I wanted to bring her on and share that story of her saying, you know what, college isn't for me, I'm going to leave, I'm going to figure this stuff out on my own, I'm going to take a more immersive program and then go on and do the kind of work that I already know I'm excited about. A lot of people talk about doing this. Very few people actually follow through on it, which is why I thought her story was so cool, because it's inspiring to anyone who is out there thinking like, I kind of want to go do something different, but I'm not sure if I should do it. It's kind of risky. I'm a little scared. Bekah said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go do it. She did it, and it's turned out amazingly well for her. So I'm really excited to share her story with you. And with that, let's welcome Bekah to the show. Bekah, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on today.
Thank you. It's good to talk.
Yeah, so we were having some fun trying to figure out the best room for you to call from before getting started here, because you're in your startup offices today, right?
Yep, I am. Yep.
Yeah, and so what's the company and what do you do there?
I work at a company called Apto, and we build commercial real estate software, and I'm a software developer.
So what does that mean, commercial real estate software?
So in commercial real estate, there are brokers and brokerages. The idea behind Apto was to create a platform that kind of makes all of your information and data more accessible and easier to read and follow. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're building software to make all of your data accessible, really.
So for somebody who's running a commercial real estate company, giving them better access to all the information on their properties and their clients?
Right. Properties, companies, contacts, clients. Like, there's a lot of information out there, and there's not really a place to keep it all. So that's what our software is doing.
Makes sense. Yeah, but I found you through this article you wrote, which was really cool, about your journey to becoming a 19-year-old full stack engineer, which I thought was really, really cool and perfect for the theme of this show, because you essentially left college to go through a programming boot camp and then ended up at this company, right?
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, so can you walk us through that story? Because I think it's such a cool example of going like a completely different route and having it work out well.
Sure. So yeah, I have looked into your podcast a little bit and what you're doing, and it's very cool, because I wish when I was in college or looking at colleges that I would have come across it, because I think it would have been so extremely helpful. Because I think, like, probably a lot of your listeners or a lot of people who are learning from you, I was in college and I was in this confusing place of that I didn't really know what I was doing there. You go to college because your high school pressures you to go to college, and you continue in college because that's what society does and that's what everyone does. You can only get a job if you have your 4-year degree. So that's kind of where I was. Is I went to a college right next to my hometown because that was the closest and easiest, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But throughout the year, my freshman year, I kind of realized that I was just like stuck and stagnant and not really doing anything that was too interesting. College classes are a lot of memorization and essays, and those are definitely not those weren't my strong points. And the things that I was interested in weren't really things that you do in a classroom setting like college. So prior to college, I had been interested in like graphic design. I did a graphic design internship. That was great. That was really cool. So I had tried to study that in college. And I think I mentioned in my article that it just was going really slowly. Like, you have one class a week on graphic design, and that didn't feel like enough. I started looking into things outside of class because the classes were quite slow, and I feel bad saying boring, but boring.
You're not alone thinking classes are boring. You're fine.
Yeah. I think maybe that's everyone in college. So I did a graphic design internship the summer before college, and that was really cool, really fun. It was
fast paced. I got to work on projects like constantly and learn from the people around me. I worked with another designer and a developer. The developer had the coolest job ever. I loved learning from him, but it wasn't something that I had ever actually considered for myself, being a software developer. So with that, I kind of took that into college when I started trying to learn things on my own. I started looking more into graphic design. With graphic design, I had kind of realized that I wanted to learn how to build the things out that were in my head. Like, these designs are really cool, but there's not much I can do with them if all they are just flat on a page. Like, I would love to be able to make a website out of this, or make something like a CSS animation or something. So then I tried to start taking Codecademy classes and learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And I kind of then realized, like, oh, this is what I like. Like, this is what I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I tried taking a web development class at the college I was at. It was taught by a professor who was quite out of date with these things. He was not teaching us the most recent things that were coming out in development. It was a lot of old stuff like Dreamweaver, which is part of the Adobe suite, not used anymore at all.
Oh yeah, that is literally only a tool for making college students hate web development these days. I don't know anywhere else it is used except for terrible college web dev classes.
Sure, that's what it is, because it ended up being a class of just watching tutorials on how Dreamweaver works and trying to learn things on my own on my free time. So with that, I kind of thought maybe this isn't the right school to learn web development from if I'm already having issues with the first class that I took. So really, I just started looking into other colleges that were more geared towards like graphic design or web development. And I had come across these coding bootcamps, which is something I had never heard about because it's a very new thing. These like up and coming coding bootcamps where you go to this boot camp for like 3 to 7 months and you just learn web development and that's it. And then apparently you're like guaranteed a job after, which seemed crazy to me. But I figured like, hey, I really want to learn web development and I want to learn it really well. And I want to learn the newest stuff. So maybe this is something to consider. And with that, I had like this very scary decision to make of, can I really drop out of college right now and go to something called a coding boot camp that none of my friends had ever heard of, none of my family, like no one in, I'm from Minnesota, no one in Minnesota is very technical. So in my like little community I had, no one was very technical. So this was a scary move to make. But really it came down to that I couldn't see myself going through a whole nother year or 3 years of college and kind of just like coasting along, finishing homework and doing these tests that were things that I just didn't care about, like things that I was not passionate about, I wasn't excited about, I was bored. And something that I really was excited about was learning how to code and learning how to make websites and be a web developer. So yeah, eventually I came to the decision that that's what I wanted to do. I left school, I moved to Denver, and I went to the Turing School of Software and Design. And that was a 7-month coding program. I did the front-end program because that was more geared towards front-end development, which I was the most interested in because I do have a background in graphic design. I'm still interested in graphic design and designing. Yeah, and so that's what I did for the last 7 months. It was the best decision I've ever made. I came out of it with a great job, and like I'm beyond happy right now.
That's so cool. It's such a great story because I feel like a lot of people think about doing that, or they come across the fact that these boot camps exist, or they hear about it, but very few people actually take the leap. What do you think gave you the confidence to actually leave college and go to this boot camp?
So there were a few things, I would say. One of the most important things was just the sheer fact that I was thinking to myself, like, I can't do this for another 3 years. I don't know. I feel so strongly about this, but I was so bored. And all I wanted to do was to like learn this one thing, which was design and web development. And I was being forced to take a bunch of like weird classes that I wasn't very interested in. So that was definitely like one very determining factor where I just thought like, I can't do this. For a while, I was considering just taking a year off, which I know you have done, correct? You took a year off?
Yeah, that was my solution to it.
Yes, yeah. So that was something I had also considered, was like taking a year off, going to travel. And really, like, it was between that and a coding school. And I was kind of just eager to learn and eager to feel accomplished and work really hard, because it felt like it had been a long time since I had really pushed myself and worked really hard. And I was almost like craving that feeling again. So that was a big part of it. Yeah.
Did you do it in a way where you could have gone back to college if it didn't work out? Or did you tell them, I'm out, I'm done, I'm not coming back?
I did. So I talked to my counselor at the college I was at, and I basically told her that I was just going to take 2 years off to travel. And it wasn't necessarily me trying to like hide that I was going to a code school. It was in the time where I was still unsure if I was going to go to a code school. So at the University of Minnesota where I went, that's a totally acceptable thing. You can take 2 years off and come back without anything happening, really. So that's what I did. I just went about it saying to myself, like, hey, if this doesn't work, I can just move right back and continue college. So it was nice when I left thinking that I had a backup plan. And really, I was thinking that even with this code school, that I would still need to go back to college. I was thinking, like, I'll have learned a lot, but I'll still need a degree. But that was not the case, which was very cool. But I did have to learn that along the way, because I was thinking I would just go right back to college.
Yeah, well, I think so many students don't realize that it's an option to do this soft dropout, go try something else. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back. But it's such an amazing option that pretty much everyone in college has available to them. So, I mean, some colleges, it's unlimited, right?
Right.
People give Mark Zuckerberg and that crowd a lot of credit for, dropped out of Harvard, pursued, working on a startup. But Harvard has an almost infinite return policy. I think Zuckerberg can still go back and finish his degree. Yeah, I know Stanford's that way too.
I didn't even know that.
Right? So it's not like you're really taking a risk. You can always go back and finish.
Right. And I think that's something you need to think about and understand.
Yeah, definitely. And it opens the door to all these other cool opportunities. For me, taking that year off, it didn't work out. I wasn't sure if I was going to go back or not, but I left. I was working on a startup for a year that failed. And then I had the option to just go back and finish. And for you, it seems like it's worked out really well, where it sounds like you're not really motivated to go back and finish the degree. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But really, I did drop out thinking I would have to go back to college. And it's so scary, which is unfortunate that it's such a scary thing to leave college, even though you have the intention of going back. It's still terrifying, because we're taught to graduate in 4 years and then get a degree and then get a job. So taking a year off to do something that's risky, in quotes, risky, feels absolutely terrifying. So I do hope that more people take that risk like you did. Like, you got time to learn about yourself and learn about what you wanted to do. And I'm sure that was helpful. I'm sure that was more helpful than staying in school for 4 years straight.
Oh, yeah, extremely helpful. And it also gives you a different perspective on learning, one that it sounds like you kind of got from the school as well, where you don't think of learning as this abstract thing you're doing to get grades. You sort of see the application of it directly to your work or your life beyond the confines of the school.
Right. And that was something that was so important to me, because in high school, you kind of learn your learning style. You learn how to do well on tests, and you learn how to get your homework in and get good grades. And it's not necessarily by being super smart or a genius. You can almost work around it by saying, I know if I memorize these things, I'll get an A on this test, and then I can forget it forever. So I think I kind of learned that, like, I knew how to do well in the high school setting, and in this like school, you get A's, you pass. I learned how to do well, but I wasn't necessarily like actually good at testing or actually good at writing. So it was a whole new world when I got to this coding school, and everything was project-based. And it was like very intense learning. You learn all day, and then they throw a project at you. And at Turing, they don't really give you enough information to completely finish a project. So you have to go and research it on your own and test things out. And it's just hours of like, you have to go on the internet and just learn from other projects, from other people. And this was a whole new way of learning for me, where I think I just exceeded. Whereas in school, all I had to do was like memorize and write papers, and it was so boring.
Yeah.
Being able to like research and fail over and over and over and keep working through things with partners, that was like such a different way of learning for me, and such a like successful way for me to learn. And that's really cool too, because you don't really get that in college. You don't get project-based learning.
Yeah, you really don't. And that was always one of my frustrations with it too. And that was part of why I left the, quote unquote, more practical business degree to study philosophy, because it was just like, there was no point in doing like marketing when you're not actually doing any marketing projects in the classes. It's just a waste of time.
How could you ever learn to be in marketing if you're not doing it?
Yeah. But that idea is surprisingly foreign to a lot of college professors, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah. Can you walk us through what one of those project-based classes looked like? From start to finish, how did it go? Because it is a model that is really foreign to the typical college, high school process.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll talk about the first project we got because it was really like a shock to me. So basically, the first weekend at Turing, you learn a lot, like they throw a lot at you. And that's the idea, right? Is that you're going to this boot camp where you're going to learn probably like 2.5 years worth of schooling in 7 months. So they throw a lot at you. We learned a ton of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then within like 3 to 4 days, they threw a project at us and they said, okay, you're about to build your own project. And the project was called Number Guesser. And basically what you do is you type in a number into this input field and you click a guess button and you try and guess a number 1 through 100. And on the opposite side, it'll tell you if you got the number right or not. So it sounds pretty simple, and that's all it was. But as someone who has like never really built a site, never really built anything, it seems impossible. So they teach us the very basics of JavaScript, like the very basics of how to build something, and then you get thrown into a project. You're clueless. You're like, wait a minute, why was I accepted to this school? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And you just have to figure it out. So thankfully, which I really enjoyed, is they gave us a partner right away. So you have a partner to work through this with. And so both of you are clueless. You both have to just like Google on the internet over and over what you're doing. The way that Turing works, you go in groups. So there was a group in front of us who had been at Turing for a month beforehand, so we could go ask them questions. But I would say that's been the most effective way of learning for me, is just failing over and over again. Like being in a place where you don't know anything and just failing because you don't know anything. Like you can't learn unless you force yourself to learn. And so, yeah, that was kind of how the projects went. Is they purposely don't teach you enough so that you have to go research and find it. And then the next day they will teach you how that works after you've already kind of learned yourself. You've kind of like dipped your toe in the water. So that was always very cool.
That's great. So after you go out and try to figure it out on your own, then they show you how they would do it, or other things you might not have thought about.
Exactly. Right. And they teach us really how you should be doing it. And it's so helpful because instead of learning this brand new thing without any context, you're in your head, you're already like, oh, that makes sense. That's what I tried to do. Or like, oh, that makes sense. We have to do it this way that they're teaching us. But you've already explored it and you've already kind of like dove into it really deeply and just failed and you're stuck. And now someone is like, all right, you were almost there. This is all you needed to change. That was always helpful.
And you've got this context that you can attach that knowledge to now. It's not just floating out in the ether like it might be if you're getting it via a PowerPoint presentation.
Right, exactly. And it's not something that you just copy down into your notes. It's something that you've already tried and failed at. And since it's something that you're interested in my case, like you work on it for hours and you work on a problem for hours because you want it to work. And then when someone finally tells you this is how it works, it's exciting. And it's not like a PowerPoint where you're just blindly taking notes. It's super exciting. It's a great process.
Yeah, it definitely feels amazing. I find particularly with programming, when something finally works out and it gets what you've been trying to get it to do, especially if you've been hacking at it for a while, it's just such an incredible feeling.
Absolutely.
Especially when you have to figure it out for yourself too. It sounds like there's this big component of being comfortable with failing and trying again and learning to ask good questions. Is that something that you were already good at, or did they help you become more comfortable with it?
No, it was not something I was good at, for sure, because it's very scary to admit that you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that has been like an incredible thing that I've learned how to do, is that at my current job, if I get stuck, I don't just like sit there and do nothing. I'm very happy to go ask someone like, hey, I'm clueless on this. How do I do it? And I think that's how programming works almost, is that I think it's a common rule that everyone knows that like no one really knows what they're doing. Like everyone needs help. So that's been like immensely helpful because I'd say I went into this program, I went into Turing kind of like I did pretty well in high school and pretty well in college. I was a good student and I got good grades and I could do that all on my own and I didn't really need to ask for help. So when I went to Turing and I started getting lost and feeling like I wasn't doing well, that was scary because it was like, wait a minute, this isn't me. I normally know how to get through this kind of stuff. So I really did have to learn how to like take away all my pride, like take away all the fear of looking dumb and just asking someone like, I just don't get this. I just don't get what's going on. So yeah, that was something I had to learn, but that's something that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life because it's so helpful.
Well, it's an incredible skill to have and something to be comfortable with. And I think the more time people spend in the school system to a degree, the worse they get at it. Because the more you get in your head this idea that, oh, if I don't do this perfectly the first time, then I'm like a failure and they're going to think I'm stupid.
Right.
I know that like the startup that I worked at right after college, and I've talked to some other friends in startups too, a lot of times the companies won't hire newly graduated students because they have that mentality. And it makes especially software development and design so much harder, right? Because you can imagine trying to work with somebody on a design or development team who's afraid to show you drafts of their work or afraid to ask questions, right? Things are going to move so much slower.
Right, exactly. Well, you can see it on teams normally. You can see that no one's afraid to ask questions and no one is afraid to ask like the quote dumb questions, because if there weren't being like a bunch of questions asked, if people weren't questioning things and like not arguing but kind of showing their viewpoint, like it would not be a good place to work. It wouldn't be a good team to be on because everyone would just be followers, and that's not what you want.
Definitely. Was there anything really specific you can remember that Turing did, or maybe an exercise that you did that helped you get more comfortable with that whole fail fast, ask questions, get feedback mentality?
I think so. In a way, yes. I think something else about Turing is that they teach you so much, but they kind of make you get there on your own, which is very interesting, and it was very helpful. So that's just what you said about like failing fast. They don't exactly tell you what they're doing, but they just don't teach you enough. And
okay.
Yeah, as a class, all of us, of course, we're like, well, how do we know what we're going to do? Like, we all have never seen this before and we don't know how to do this. And the teachers would just be like, you've got like these 3 hours to work on it, just work on it. And they, of course, would answer questions. It's not like they would leave us in the dust or anything. But they had a way about it where you just have to learn how to ask questions. And you're not going to go anywhere if you don't. And I think that was kind of the way they did it, is that if you don't ask questions, like you're not going to finish your project. And if you don't finish your project, you don't move on. And like that intense pressure forces you into it, which that was really cool, I think. Yeah, they give you a project and they give you 3 days to work on it. And if you don't finish it, like you fail the project. And the only way to finish a project is to ask a million people questions and is to get help from your peers. And you're kind of forced into learning how to ask questions.
That's a cool way of forcing it. Do you have any ideas for how somebody could do that without the organization kind of thrusting it upon them?
Right. I think something that was important for me was just awareness, trying to realize when I was being quiet. I was trying to understand, like, why am I not asking a question right now? Why am I afraid? Like, why do I think that this is going to make me look dumb? And so it takes a long time to get over that fear. It feels impossible because, like you said, we're kind of taught almost that if you don't get it the first time, you weren't smart enough to understand. So for me, it was a lot about awareness, a lot about trying to understand where these fears were coming from and that they were silly and like it just doesn't matter. So that's kind of what I had to do, is understand where it was coming from and then try and ignore those fears and do the opposite, really.
You were doing side projects before you went to Turing, right?
Right.
Like learning on your own. How did that get started?
That just got started when I became interested in coding, really, and I just looked online, like how to learn how to code. There's so many resources. There's so many tutorials. There's some great sites like Codecademy. They just walk you through tutorials of how to learn HTML and CSS, and it starts really slowly and then ramps up a little bit. So really that's what I had been working on. And outside of coding, I was doing just some graphic design stuff too. So it wasn't anything like huge. It wasn't anything that's like super impressive. But I think just, like learning on the outside has always been helpful.
It sounds like Codecademy was a big resource for you. Were there any others that were really helpful with teaching yourself some programming?
I would say those were the most helpful. I did go into Turing with very little experience, which felt crazy because I was thinking, like, how could I become a software developer after this? Because all I know is that I want to learn. I don't really know much. But Turing once you get accepted, they give you a lot of resources to go through. So that was helpful as well. One of them specifically was just like a puzzle site almost, like logic puzzles and little math problems, which was very interesting because when you think of coding, you don't necessarily think of logic, but that is a lot of it, is logic puzzles. And so those were really fun for me, doing just little logic puzzles.
Nice. What was the application process like, by the way? How do you, get into Turing?
So application process, so they have two different ways that you can get in, really. One way is a normal application process. Another way is that they have events in Denver called Try Turing, and it's basically a weekend event. It's either all day Saturday or all day Saturday and Sunday where you can try coding and kind of learn about the school, learn about the process. And I believe they're still doing this, where if you go to a Try Turing event, you get like a $500 discount or something, and you waive the first step of the application process, and all you have to do is like the in-person interview or Skype interview, which that's really cool. But since I was in Minnesota, I had to do like an application initially and kind of test into it and then do the Skype interview. So the application for me, there was three main components. You had to answer some questions. They wanted a essay, like a writing piece about something you're passionate about, which I find very interesting and very telling of Turing, is that they're interested in seeing people's passions, which is the reason why I chose Turing over some other coding schools. And they had a video interview, which was absolutely terrifying for me because I didn't want to upload a video of myself talking and send it to people. But I did it anyways, and it was fine. And the video was a few questions as well, just like your background, why you're interested in programming, just general questions, just like why you would choose Turing, what you would want to do after Turing, those kind of things. And then the third part of that application was the test, really. So they gave me eight logic problems and just wanted to see if you could work through them and solve them. Those were fun and interesting.
What did you write about for your passion?
My passion, I wrote about food and nutrition. So that was something I was very interested in before college. That's another thing about college is I started studying nutrition and it wasn't what I wanted it to be.
What was different?
It was a lot more about science, and that sounds very funny. So it was a lot of science and chemistry, and it seemed like the people in this field were going to be like nutritionists in hospitals and in like senior homes, and that wasn't really what I was interested in. I had kind of realized what I was interested in was helping people realize things that will make them happier, as in like eating better and like exercising more. And that kind of translates to what I'm doing today, which not necessarily with a diet or exercise, but I am still like very, very passionate about helping people like realize their potential and helping people realize what they can do. So it's kind of interesting seeing where I thought I wanted to go and where I've ended up and it's all connected. So it's very interesting.
Well, and you can always circle back to that later.
Totally, yeah.
What were the other boot camps that you looked at that you weren't as interested, that you ended up not being as interested in?
So there was a few of them. So they're kind of all over the place, the boot camps are. I think there are some in Minnesota even, and there are a lot like in California and some in Chicago, and some are well known, some are not. Something I was really looking for when I was looking at a boot camp was that it was immersive, that it was in person, because a lot of these are online. And something I know about myself is that I'm not great at learning online, or especially like online classes, because for me it's just harder to stay invested and stay involved, really, because it's easy to get distracted and easy to skip something, or I don't know. I just knew that I wanted an in-person experience, and that kind of knocked a ton of them off the table because a lot of them are either fully online or like a month online, 3 months in person, and then a month online again. So that didn't leave me with a ton of options. Some other schools that I was looking at, I think there's one called like Dev Bootcamp. I don't remember the names of other ones really because it was a long time ago. But Turing just stood out to me so much because, number one, they're a nonprofit, which I think every other coding school is for-profit, which was very interesting to me and it's very telling of like what their goals are really. And another thing about Turing, like they have a lot of really cool missions and goals about like diversity and inclusion. And that was great to hear. And Turing was like the longest program out of all of them. So it was 7 months long versus like 5 or versus 3 months. So there's a lot of factors that went into choosing this school, and I'm happy I did because it's like an incredible community, and I still talk to people there, and I still go try and mentor students, and I still talk to the mentors that mentored me when I was a student. So it's been a great community.
What's the tuition like?
Tuition. So when I joined, or when I went to Turing, the tuition at the time was around 17, and now since they have bumped it up to around 20. And I think the man who's the head of Turing, his name is Jeff Casimir, he wrote an article about it explaining basically why they had to up the tuition, and it was very fair, basically. Like it just made sense that the program is getting bigger, they're having to hire more teachers, they had to move to a bigger building, and he was saying, as a student, this extra $3,000 isn't, it'll take you only like half of a month to make up if you get a job right after. So everything about the school really is very honest and fair, which I really enjoy. But there is a scholarship program that you can apply for. There's a scholarship, and it's for like diversity or inclusion, really. Like if you're a female or if you are just diversity in tech, basically.
Okay. And what was the hiring process like afterwards? Because it sounds like you went almost straight from Turing to Apto. So how did they help set all of that up?
So similar to what I said before, where Turing, they give you a lot, but they don't hand you anything on a silver platter, right? That was the same thing with the job search, where they give you a million resources and so many people to help you along the way, but you have to work for it on your own. Like they're not going to hand you a job. They're not going to give you a company to interview with. You have to do that part on your own, which I think is very valuable because now I know how to job search and how to network. But basically, we have a lot of little classes on job searching, on networking, on interviews, like on technical interviews, and you kind of have to figure the rest out. And at the time that I was at Turing, there was a career coach. I took full advantage of that. I went and met with her all the time. They have a huge list of mentors these are either people who have gone through Turing, they've gone through the program, or just people in the community who are fine with being reached out to. So my plan of action was to meet up with as many people as I could, learn from as many people as I could, and kind of take that huge conglomerate of information and try and get a job out of it. So that was kind of my technique, is learning as much as I could from everyone. And yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like they really stressed that, like making you self-sufficient instead of relying on the system to hand things to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about, thinking of the future beyond Apto? Do you have any like really big goals or future projects that you want to work on?
At the moment, I'm quite happy here. I enjoy this company. I love my team and I love the people I work with. Really, I would like to keep continuing to mentor students at Turing. It's really great kind of getting out there and giving back to the community that gave so much to me. That's been wonderful. I recently talked to someone who, a mentor of mine, and she said, it's great to help people and it's great to help people along, but be sure that you're focusing on your career and focusing on your goals and where you want to be. And so I had asked her, like, what do you think that should be for me? And then she said that I should try and be a CTO or a CEO of a company someday. That was just really cool hearing that. And I think maybe that's where I'd want to end up, just kind of climb the ladder up.
Yeah. Well, what about like if money weren't a concern, what do you think you'd work on?
What do you think I would work on?
Yeah. Or what do you think you would work on if, money were no longer a concern right now?
I think I would stay here,
Yeah?
to be honest. Yeah. it's been really cool experiencing like how a startup runs, and especially a startup that is 6 years old. So it's built out really well. Like we have a great trajectory. Things are looking up. And I work with a great CTO. His name is Steve Neely. He's a wonderful person, and he meets with everyone on engineering. He has one-on-ones with them. He checks in with us all the time and makes sure we're on track to like our goals and our future. And I've never met someone quite so like inspiring and nice and friendly. And I think I would stay here because I have a lot to learn from these people still, and I have a lot to learn from this company and this business, and I'm really enjoying it right now. That's
great. And are you doing anything outside of the company to keep getting better at the web dev work?
Yeah, so in my free time, I like to kind of try and keep my skills sharp, and so I go on a website called Codewars, and they basically give you some simple like JavaScript problems. It's like little puzzles, so I like to do that. I like to keep myself updated with that. Sometimes on weekends, I'll take on like a little project just for fun. My friends came to visit me from Minnesota recently, so I made a countdown website for their date to come, and they got a kick out of that, and it was fun to build. So yeah, things like that, trying to keep my skills sharp.
Yeah, no, that's great. Are there any like last thoughts that we haven't touched on related to this whole idea of leaving college, learning programming and just going for that whole that lifestyle and that career trajectory?
Nothing crazy, except for just I hope people will be brave and kind of go against the status quo and go against like everything that their friends and family and society is saying, and follow their heart. It was so scary and so hard, but like it's been more than worth it, and I just hope that everyone has the courage to do this.
I think that's a fantastic note to wrap up on.
Yeah.
Bekah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this whole story with us. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's just Bekah Lundy, I believe. There's that Medium article that I wrote that you found me from. That's on Medium. I think it's called My Journey to Becoming a 19-Year-Old Full Stack Engineer. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Or email. My email is actually, I don't know. Should I say this?
Maybe just say Twitter. It's
Twitter. Okay.
I haven't heard of anyone's email inboxes getting blown up yet, but you never know.
All right, we'll just stick with it.
And I'll be sure to link to all of that in the show notes so people can find it.
Okay, that's good. I'm happy to answer questions and help out because, I was right there with all these people like stuck in college. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Bekah, and we'll be sure to stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Nat Chat. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to Nat Chat in iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Second, if you're trying to take advantage of some of the information from this episode, be sure you check out the show notes at nateliason, nateliason.com/podcast, and find a friend, because implementing a lot of this stuff is much easier if you have somebody to do it with. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode and you've been enjoying other episodes of the podcast, please leave it a review on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your casts so that more people can find it. This is the best way for it to get some more exposure and to make sure that I can keep bringing these episodes to you. With that, thank you and have an awesome rest of your day.